Congresswoman, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Rennie. It's great to be with you once again.
It is great to hear you once again, and I see that you're trying to weather the storm. I guess the performance you're putting on these days, one can simply say your performance, nobody can trump that. Anyway, I shouldn't say that. I should be careful about that. Florida is having a tough time this morning, and I know that our hearts and our minds are with the people down there. But in Trinidad and Tobago, like the rest of the Caribbean and the rest of the world, hearts and minds, Congresswoman, are very, very disappointed that the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival has been allowed. It's the 2012 Obama program has been allowed to just die on the vine. In other words, they have put a 6-month on this, which means we are talking about 800,000 immigrants at risk of either being deported or being in, stateless people. You are the representative, and you have been looking at issues like this for a long time. You and the Democrats see this, and we are all worrying, is there anything can be done here? Explain to our listeners, please, one, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, what the decision of the president means, and what is being done about it.
Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share with your listening audience, Rennie. Under President Barack Obama, the executive order was put forth to provide for young people who were brought to the United States as children a status that enables them to receive work authorization to attend colleges and universities without fear of deportation.
Mm-hmm.
For many of these young people, the United States is the only nation that they can really affiliate themselves with, because this is the only nation that they've known since they were born here as children. And because the US Congress back in 2010 did not complete the comprehensive immigration reform and pass that legislation, the President Barack Obama, in a battle to really preserve a humanitarian cause, put forth an executive order that had our United States citizenship and information system to create this status for these 800,000 young people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, right now, the Donald Trump and his administration, through Attorney General Jeff Sessions, have revoked that status and have basically thrown all of these young people into a limbo with regard to their status here in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
He has deferred enforcement on that decision for 6 months, which gives the United States Congress that period of time to pass legislation that would confer status on these young people, and that is exactly what we intend to do.
Mm. The fact that Donald Trump has been saying this for a long time, he said it all the way on the stump that I'm going to turn this back. As a matter of fact, he said on day one, I'm going to turn this back. So nobody should have been surprised with it. The fact that he actually did it, well, you can say, I can't believe he did, but we cannot exactly say that we're surprised. I would assume that, like yourself, our fellow Democrats knew this was coming and had a couple of things up their sleeve. So my question is there anything outside of a whole reversal by Congress, any of the existing acts, i.e. the DREAM Act, the Recognizing America's Children Act, the Bridge Act, any of these things that already have Republican support, can any of these bills come in and work as a way of avoiding the deportation or the statusless position of these victims, the 800 immigrants we're talking about? Can any of these acts come in to ease that situation?
Absolutely. We are focused on passing the DREAM Act of 2017. And we have over 150 co-sponsors of that legislation as we speak right now. When we return to Washington next week, we will continue to gather more and more members as sponsors of that legislation. Again, our goal is to pass the DREAM Act of 2017 before the end of the year.
The proud daughter of Councilmember Yvette Clarke. This is of Jamaican parenthood. Hey, hello. Great ancestry there. We're talking to US Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. She is the congressional representative for Brooklyn's 9th District. We are talking about DACA and Trump and the avenues available to deal with the immigrants. Give the government a lot of their personal details to get to be a part of DACA, which is the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which you detailed a moment ago. There are now questions as if this information will be used against them now to deport them.
Well, I mean, that is always a question. I think that the public sentiment, being more than 70% of all Americans, are in favor of conferring permanent status on these DACA individuals, would make it very difficult for members of Congress who are coming up, particularly in the House of Representatives for election next year, to allow that status to imperil these young people. So I believe that the political will is behind providing for these young people a pathway to regularization and to status in the United States, and it would be foolhardy or, quite frankly, political suicide for many of these members were they to sit back idly while an enforcement action is taken on these young people. So we continue to be extremely grateful to the American people and the public that have been rallying, that have been confronting members of Congress who have expressed opposition to this. That political pressure has made it much more likely that we will be able to pass legislation because that is the will of the people.
Congresswoman, there is an underlying thread here that folks don't often pay attention to. It is one of the arguments put forward by the NYPD on the issue of sanctuary cities, and this has to do with, as long as you put people in a position like this sort of limbo, this sort of threat, they are not going to want to cooperate with the police because for fear of being exposed, which means that even those who may say, I have no children in the United States who I carry there illegally, I have no such children. The fact is, the communities that you may have a family in, even though that family member may be as quote-unquote totally straight, those communities are now in danger because if the inhabitants of those communities are not reporting to the police for fear of being deported, then a lot of crime and criminality will be going on that endangers everybody in that community.
Absolutely. And we've also looked at the economic factor. These are individuals who are contributing billions of dollars to the U.S. economy each year. Mm-hmm. And their participation in the various industries has made it possible, quite frankly, for many of our corporate leaders, particularly in the technology industry, to stand out and speak publicly about their desire to see these young people being given status. Mm-hmm. We know that aside from public safety, there are economic consequences to the United States. One, trying to deport 800,000 young people, and their economic consequences in terms of the blow that our economy will feel with the immediate extraction of the talent and expertise that these young people possess and have, quite frankly, become a part of the fabric of the United States economy. So there are multiple reasons why it is imperative that the United States Congress act and act swiftly.
You have for a long time, and every chance I've had the opportunity, both in New York and here in Trinidad, for us to talk about this situation. We understand the uphill climb it is for countries who must receive deportees. But before I get to that part of the deportees, I want to do something that I'm sure that you must have heard your parents or grandparents refer to. I've heard it here in Trinidad. If your left hand is hurting you, hit the right hand harder, and then you forget about the left hand. Because, and I say that I say that because this new thing here with DACA is one instance that calls for our attention. However, it masks the incomplete situation as it relates to Donald Trump extreme vetting and the deportation of a lot of people for minor offenses that is still to be addressed and corrected.
Absolutely. Well, the one thing that is so significant about the DACA program is that there's no need to extreme vet. In order for individuals to be eligible for DACA, they had to go through extreme vetting.
Already.
And that is the only way that status could be conferred upon them. So these are individuals that we know who are on the right side of the law, have complied with all of the requirements and qualifications to be given and granted that status under President Obama. So, there are no obstacles in the way of these individuals being conferred permanent status here in the United States. It's just the will of the legislative body and the individuals who comprise it that will determine in the long run what happens with these individuals.
US Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, you will forgive my artful segue there. I was attempting to move into the area of some of the areas. Thank you for the clarity in the area of where the DACA people and the extreme vetting they went through already is established. I was trying to segue into the area of the extreme vetting and the number of people who are being sent back to the Caribbean. I remember when we spoke about this and worked with this, the question of money being given to Caribbean governments to reintegrate some of these deportees back into their countries, and that did not go anywhere. But it is still a problem that is now even more so an issue because accelerated number of nationals from the region are being sent back home, Trinidad and Tobago being no exception.
Absolutely, and unfortunately, we don't have an administration in place that has any empathy or sympathy where that is concerned. We will continue through legislative means to appropriate funds for the region and, make the argument, particularly in the Congress, as to why this is a win-win for both our region and the Caribbean region, that we provide these reintegration funds to these nations. To have these nations in the Caribbean made unstable as a result of action that we may take here in the United States would be, quite frankly, very, it would be, for us, something that would ultimately have a backlash in terms of destabilizing the Caribbean region, which is, of course, within the hemisphere of the United States. So we need to make sure that we continue, and I certainly will, along with my colleagues in the Caribbean Caucus and the Congressional Black Caucus, to push for continued support of these appropriations to assist.
Failure to do that, and I agree with you 100%, failure to do that is going to create a situation here that is, anytime the region is unstable, then you're going to have, Pastor Wright statement, chickens are going to come home to roost, because invariably that is going to be exported. It's in everybody's interest to ensure that we are in fact settling people here, because if we don't, we are looking at chaos.
Absolutely. So we know that legislation was passed for the Caribbean Strategic Partnership, and we consider the reintegration appropriation to be a part of that strategic partnership.
I've got two questions in conclusion, U.S. Congresswoman Yvette Clarke. One of them is parents who either came back home and left their kids up there knowing that they were secured in the DACA arrangements, or those who were deported and are back here but the kids are out there. What do you have to say to them this morning that can give them some sense of comfort?
Well, I want all of our nationals to know that there are, there is consensus growing in the United States Congress that we must act on behalf of these young people, that they, for all intents and purposes, are Americans who need to be made whole with conferred status to enable them to live out their lives free of concern about deportation, and that at the heart of the immigration system here in the United States for generations has been family reunification. We're hearing a lot of conversation about that today over the past week in Washington, and there is growing momentum for comprehensive immigration reform as a result of what Donald Trump and his administration has done in terms of targeting undocumented immigrants in the United States. So I would tell nationals throughout the Caribbean that, the fight continues, that there are many voices across the Congress that are working very hard to, one, stabilize the DACA recipients, but beyond that, to look at comprehensive immigration reform that, one, includes family reunification, but moves our nation into the 21st century, treating those who are amongst us undocumented and those who are seeking to come to the United States with human dignity and respect.
You are a congressional representative. You are the representative for the 9th Congressional District in Brooklyn. You are a legislator. You are in a position where folks will say, looking at what is going on here, Donald Trump is like a juggernaut coming down the hill, and nobody can stop him, not even the Democrats right now. So, is it incorrect for folks to say that there must be some optimism on behalf of the Democrats that come midterms next year to take control of the House and maybe the Senate, and that in itself could prevent some guarantee of looking after the protection of immigrants from the region on their issue as well as other issues?
Absolutely. The Democrats are in a good position right now to take back the House in the midterm elections. We are working to identify candidates in districts that Hillary Clinton won that are currently represented by Republicans, where we know that there are voters there that are displeased with what is taking place in Washington, D.C., what the Republicans and Donald Trump have put forth as their agenda, and we intend to forge forward full force to win those seats. And I also want your listeners to know that, this is the first time that we have a sitting, not the first time, but the first time in a long time that we have a sitting president that is currently under federal investigation. So while things seem a bit dark right now, many of us believe that Donald Trump will not serve out his full term. There are many indications due to what is being unfolded through congressional investigations by Special Prosecutor Bob Mueller, that there was collusion with the Russian government in the last election, and a lot of it points to Donald Trump and his campaign.
All right, we're going to look to see how that pans out. I cannot have you here and not remind our listeners that you represent the area that Labor Day is vested in. We're talking about the biggest celebration of Trinidad and Tobago nationals and Caribbean people on the Parkway. You are always there at the breakfast. I don't know if you did it this year, and I know you attended. How did it work out this year? Congresswoman? I think we lost our connection at that point. All right. I want to thank my guest, the Congresswoman.
It went very well this year, Rennie. Very well. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Thank you very much. Please go ahead. You said it went very well. Congresswoman, I had you there.
Okay, very well, yes. You were speaking about West Indian American Day Carnival.
That is correct.
Yes, and it was spectacular as ever. This year, concerns around violence were mitigated by new procedures, particularly for Ajuve, and I think that we've turned the corner on those types of behaviors. We were pretty much incident-free, and again, a wonderful display of Caribbean culture.
I'm very glad for that, but I'm always disturbed, as you yourself have said many times, and I concur, that we have a situation where folks get into blaming the festival for things that happen every weekend in New York and make this out to be a bad thing and of course, putting a bad name on the community.
Absolutely. Well, we have, I think, turned the corner on that. We continue. This year was the 50th anniversary of Carnival in New York City, in Brooklyn, New York, in the 9th Congressional District. And we look forward to another 50 years of Carnival here in Brooklyn, New York.
I hope that your schedule allows that we can do this a little more often. US Congresswoman Yvette Clarke, representing the 9th Congressional District. Thank you so much for taking this Sunday to be with us.
Well, thank you for having me. It's so good to hear your voice, Rennie. We miss you here in New York, but our loss is TNT's gain.
We keep working, and I can always reach out to you, so I can always get my sunshine from that side. Thank you so very much, Congresswoman.
Absolutely.
Have yourself a wonderful day. Thank you so very much now.